GamingBolt presents 15 things No Man's Sky players hate about the game. No Man's Sky is a great game, don't get us wrong. It's an amazing experience unlike anything else in the industry at this time. And the more time we spend with the game, the more we like it. It's just that it's ultimately not a perfect game, and as such, it makes a fair few mistakes along the way. Mistakes that stand out even more in contrast to the game's staggering ambition. These aren't mistakes that make No Man's Sky a bad game. Most of the times, they barely detract from the experience at all. But there's still problems with the game, and there's still something that players don't like most of the times. Hopefully, these are all addressed by the developer in updates going forward. Until then, here are 15 things about the game that players don't like. The FOV in the PS4 version. We're going to start with the biggest problem we have with the game, and unlike most of what follows on the list, this problem is big enough to have impeded our enjoyment of the title. The FOV of No Man's Sky is terrible on the PS4. It's too narrow, and everything is too zoomed in. That means for the more motion sick among our members, including yours truly, the FOV can actually induce nausea bad enough that one needs to play the game in short bursts. It's a shame because the world of No Man's Sky demands exploration at length, but the motion sickness can get bad enough to keep you from actually doing that. The fact that the PS4 version doesn't let you adjust the FOV, we know the PC version will have this option, adds insult to injury. Really, one of the most pressing things for Hello Games to do is add an FOV slider to the options menu of the PS4 version of No Man's Sky. Procedural generation can throw the progression curve off. The best thing about No Man's Sky is that it's procedurally generated, meaning that each world you encounter is truly unique and unlike any of the other worlds that you've been on. Unfortunately, that also includes the first worlds you start the game on, and therein lies the symptom to a larger problem. Because worlds in No Man's Sky are generated randomly, you can easily be a player starting out on a hostile world with toxic climate and loads of drones and aggressive wildlife, making your first few hours very difficult. Conversely, you can have entire stretches of the game where nothing happens, and you just land on a planet, harvest resources, and fly off again. All because the progression is determined by the worlds you encounter, and those are generated randomly. Truly, this is a situation which shows us how even the best thing can be a double-edged sword. Tutorials. No Man's Sky is a massive and almost overwhelming game with a whole lot going on, and very little effort made to actually clue players in to any of that. There are very few tutorials in No Man's Sky, and a lot that the game simply does not bother to tell you. And while there is something to be said for a game that drops players into its world and lets them figure things out as they go along, old school style, some tutorials for basic mechanics and controls would not have gone amiss. Even Dark Souls makes at least that concession. Speaking of which, the controls. Quick, tell us, how do you sprint in the average first-person game? You press the left stick, right? Well, not in No Man's Sky. In this game, you sprint by pressing the right analog stick. That might sound like nitpicking, but it can completely throw you off when you're still learning the ropes of the game. There are other similar control quirks, such as scanning being mapped to the left shoulder button and trigger, and the worst part is, the game doesn't let you remap controls. Then there are other control issues. For instance, in general, No Man's Sky makes you hold down a key each time you would think to press it. Now for some things like trashing items in your inventory, that makes sense. It ensures no one does something stupid accidentally, but simply selecting a menu choice in the discovery menu, why does one have to hold down a button for that? Why is simply pressing it not enough? The HUD. It also doesn't help that the HUD in the game is a bit obtuse. Most of it is actually pretty simple and brilliant once you get the hang of it, but the fact of the matter remains that the game simply doesn't bother to tell you. What is the crescent in the center top of the screen? What are those meters and readings in the bottom left? Why are there tiny icons in the bottom right that show up only some, but not all, of the time? What do the icons in the top left mean? Good luck figuring out as you play and die, because the game won't tell you. Frame rate drops on PS4. You know what really sucks for a game with a low FOV? A low frame rate, which No Man's Sky already has, what with it being only 30 FPS, at least on PS4. You know what sucks more for it? Frame rate drops, which can add the sickness to the motion really well, and yet No Man's Sky has those too. Not too often, and on the whole, it is amazing how well the tech of the game holds up, rendering the game at a steady pace, but the frame rate drops are there, and they can really ruin your day. Multiplayer. This isn't something that bothers us as much as it bothers the community, but No Man's Sky has no active multiplayer. This is apparently something the community was expecting from the game. Even though the universe in the game is a shared one across all players, and even though players can theoretically be in the same place in the universe at the same time, they'll never see each other and never interact with each other. It's actually a bit of a shame, even we have to admit. Exploring the recesses of deep space with our friends sounds like the kind of thing we would have liked to do. More about resource collection than exploration, at least at first. No Man's Sky is technically a game about the joys of exploration, and most players know to expect just that from it. But for the first few hours of playing the game, you wouldn't know it because the game just comes off as a knockoff of Minecraft or any one of the countless clones it's inspired on PC, albeit in a procedurally generated space setting. It's only once you spend enough time with the game and get a few hours in that the game lets you do your thing at your own pace, and that's when you realize that this isn't just a poor man's Minecraft set in space, it's actually an immersive space exploration game unlike any seen before. Pop in on PS4. What could make a game with poor FOV and low frame rate with further drops even worse? Pop in, of course, and that's just what No Man's Sky has, and a lot of it too. The worst part is that they just become blurred as you get near the popped in artifacts, and then they just sort of blur and phase away. Between the bright colors, low frame rate, and motion sickness inducing FOV, it's enough to make you think you're on a bad trip. No custom waypoints. No Man's Sky is all about exploration, which is why this omission is so baffling. If a player happens to come upon something interesting, whether on land or in space that they want to go back to and explore later, why does the game not let them drop a waypoint there that they could then use to find their way back later? Does the game truly expect us to remember what part of what planet of what star system of what galaxy the specific thing the player stumbled upon was? That's absurd. This is a glaring and basic omission that we hope Hello Games adds to the game soon. No fast travel to ship. We understand that this is a game about exploration and survival, so we're not asking for the ability to fast travel between all markers or shelters on the map. But if the game expects us to explore, it expects us to walk away from our ship, which is great, but sometimes we can have walked very far away from our ship on an often hostile world, and the prospect of actually having to make our way back can be daunting enough that we wouldn't get too far from the ship to begin with. This is a science fiction game. Basic fast travel ability to the ship isn't something that we'll find hard to justify. It's something the game needs, or it's psychologically reducing the incentives for players to actually set out and explore the surfaces of the planets that they land on. Alien languages. This is a bit of a minor nitpick, but really guys, there are too many alien words in too many alien languages for us to learn, and not enough of those knowledge stones to teach them to us. Maybe there could be something in the game that could teach us more than one word at a time, or at least teach us the same world in multiple languages. We would like that, yeah. Combat. Put simply, combat in No Man's Sky is a bit terrible. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with it, it just doesn't feel fun to play, and it detracts from the central point of the game, which is exploration, as a result. The sad part though is that the game keeps pushing us into combat situations, which is patently unappreciated because we just want to explore and we don't like the combat. Look, we're fine with the combat being there, and we can even understand that some players might even like it. That's great, let them engage in it if they want to. But can we please just continue to explore this world without having a drone breathing down our neck every single time we so much as touch a node of metal? Structural repetition. The one thing that can be said about No Man's Sky is that it's truly infinite. Unfortunately, infinity can be a bit boring, not because it's a bit monotonous and repetitive, and No Man's Sky falls to that same trap too. There may be 18 quintillion planets in No Man's Sky, but a lot of them end up amounting to the same thing in the moment-to-moment gameplay loop. It's mostly not a problem now, and for No Man's Sky players, it might not ever be. Then again, it is just as possible that the game begins to wear thin on players eventually. Inventory space. The one thing that all No Man's Sky players will agree on is that it simply does not give you enough inventory space. For a game that emphasizes resource collection as much as this one does, it's shocking how little space it gives us to keep and store our loot. This is a problem at all times in the game, even when we can expand the inventory space available to us. The amount of loot we generally have or want to carry has increased proportionally. The fact that some slots of your inventory are given to mandatory life support and ship systems only exasperates the problem. Hello Games, please let us carry more stuff on us.
Like this video? Why not give us a like and subscribe? We try and upload amazing videos almost every single day. Thank you for watching this video, and we'll see you on the next one.